The standard model of particle physics and general relativity are incredibly successful at predicting the outcomes of experiments. But if you try to place them inside the same physical description of reality, you hit a structural wall. You have to tear right through a smooth, continuous geometric surface to find a boiling, discrete quantum reality underneath. They are ontologically heterogeneous. Classical gravity represents spacetime as a continuous Lorentzian manifold. Freely falling bodies follow the curves of that geometry. There is no local force field, and the math relies entirely on smooth, unbroken lines. Electromagnetism, the weak interaction and the strong interaction, operate under entirely different rules. They are built on gauge field sectors and quantized, discrete excitations. Their mathematics demand discrete packets of energy jumping between states. These spiraling particle tracks from a bubble chamber show the physical reality of those quantized interactions. We can clearly track these discrete excitations in high-energy physics experiments. Grouping all of these phenomena together under the colloquial banner of four fundamental forces compresses several completely inequivalent levels of reality into one misleading category. It masks a theoretical inconsistency at the core of modern physics. We usually explain these interactions through the shorthand of force carriers. We teach that particles mediate forces by bouncing between matter, like two people throwing a heavy ball back and forth to push themselves apart. That metaphor breaks down under scrutiny. Gluons carry the strong force, but they carry color charge themselves and are permanently confined. You will never observe an isolated gluon traveling between 2 points. Weak bosons are massive, unstable resonances that only exist after electroweak symmetry breaking, and classical gravity has no proven particle carrier at all. The TCGS-SEQUENTION framework addresses this theoretical seam. It completely separates the concept of a fundamental interaction from the existence of a localized particle. Instead of relying on mechanistic particle exchange, the framework organizes physics into a strict hierarchy. The interactions we observe are reclassified as shadow modalities. These modalities are downstream effects, governed by an upstream set of rules called the extrinsic constitutive law, or ECL. True unification requires a complete rebuild of how we categorize physical ontology. We cannot achieve it by forcing gravity into the shape of a gauge theory, or by forcing continuous geometry to act like a discrete particle. The framework relies on the non-collapse hierarchy. This is a strict categorical rule. You cannot conflate an observable downstream field with the upstream source of physical reality. The hierarchy begins at the very top with the complete source. This is a non-temporal, four-dimensional counterspace. It contains the complete antecedent structural content of reality prior to any localized field or particle. Directly below the source is the extrinsic constitutive law, or ECL. The ECL is not a particle. It is not a superfield. It is a source-grounded map that assigns a complete family of physical readouts. It determines how the source data can be translated into observable effects. This translation creates an epistemic cut. Everything above this line is inaccessible source geometry. Everything below it is the shadow, the three-dimensional observable universe where we conduct our experiments. The first layer in the shadow is the interaction modality. This is an equivalence class of readouts. It identifies a specific type of coupling and response structure, like electromagnetism or gravity, without identifying that structure with any single specific particle token. Below the modality, the physics of the standard model appears. The modality generates effective fields. Those fields produce carrier excitations, like photons or gluons. Finally, at the very bottom, those excitations leave a detector record in our equipment. A photon or a graviton sits near the bottom of this chain. Taking an excitation from the observable shadow and declaring it the ultimate cause of a force collapses the hierarchy. The extrinsic constitutive law is a single, unified map. We have to explain how it produces four distinct forces in our 3D observable universe. The TCGS framework resolves this through upstream unification. The single source law branches into two principal response families before generating specific local fields. The first branch is the embedding and geometric response family. Gravity belongs here. It is the geometric response required to keep our 3D observable space consistent with the complete 4D source embedding. The second branch is the internal stabilizer response family. This pathway houses the complex gauge symmetries that organize the remaining interactions in particle physics. This internal response branch subdivides. It generates the non-abelian strong modality, governing SU3 color and confinement, alongside an electroweak target modality. Finally, through symmetry reduction in the vacuum phase, the electroweak sector splits into the distinct electromagnetic and weak interactions we observe at low energies. Gravity does not share the same mechanism or carrier spin as electromagnetism. Under this architecture, requiring identical mechanisms is an unnecessary premise. Gravity occupies a different structural branch of the same unified source. This architecture does not deny the existence of quantum fields or particle excitations. The particles themselves are entirely real. We confirm their reality using massive operational corridors, like the toroidal magnets in the Atlas detector. It takes immense downstream infrastructure in the shadow universe to capture and record a carrier excitation. The framework simply reclassifies their status. The photon is a gapless downstream excitation of an unbroken abelian modality. You can observe the same underlying electromagnetic relation through photons in a vacuum, or through plasmons and polaritons in a material. The W and Z bosons are massive, transient resonances resulting from a broken symmetry sector. They do not travel freely across vast distances. The gluon is a field quantum internal to the color modality. Confinement guarantees it never exists as a freely traveling messenger between separate detectors. The ECL does not literally toss these particles between localized matter to mediate relations. The particles are the observable wake of the modality. The framework completely rejects carrier reductionism. The fact that we can detect a carrier in an accelerator proves its operational reality. It does not grant its source primacy. This logic applies directly to classical gravity. If a graviton is eventually discovered, it will be a downstream quantum excitation of the geometric branch. It will not be the primary cause of gravitational curvature. Firmly. To maintain this logic, the framework sets absolute guardrails. The ECL must never be treated as a hidden fifth force. It is not a universal ether. It is not a parent particle waiting to split in a collider. Treating the unified law as an invisible substance or a physical field reintroduces mechanistic assumptions. Those assumptions inevitably require researchers to manually retune parameters for every new dataset, destroying actual predictive unification. The instinct to point to a physical particle as the sole cause of a physical force is a human bias. Achieving theoretical closure requires abandoning that constraint. For decades, attempts at unification relied on mechanistic homogenization. We tried to force all four interactions to operate via the exact same kind of particle exchange mechanism. The TCGS solution proves that unity exists upstream, prior to the mechanism. The unity is located entirely within a single, source-grounded map that assigns readability profiles to the universe. Maintaining this relies completely on the non-collapse hierarchy. The mathematics governing the 3D shadow must remain separate from the ontology of the 4D source. The fields and particles we interact with are real, and they are foundational relative to our observable reality. But true progression in physics requires looking past the carrier and mapping the unified law that projects them into existence.